I'm Justin Hunter. I'm the co-chair of the Japanese Performing Arts SIG for Society for Ethnomusicology. This is our third speaker in. Oh, there's Jennifer back. This is our third speaker in our Zoom series from the JPA, and I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer to let her introduce John.
Hi, my apologies. My internet got wonky there for a second, so hopefully that won't happen again. But hi, I'm Jennifer Matsui. I know a great many of you signed on tonight. For those of you I don't know, I am co-chair of the Japanese Performing Arts Special Interest Group with my friend and colleague, Justin Hunter. I teach at Union College, and I'm so happy to be able to wrap up our series on Zen-related arts, although John is going to take us in some interesting directions today, not necessarily about Zen arts themselves. I will let him certainly speak to his heart's content about Jo Hakyu, but let me introduce him first for you all, which is John Oglevee, is a founding member of International Performing Collective Theater Nogaku. He is a licensed Kita-ryu Shitekata instructor and an adjunct professor at Hosei University and Musashino University. His focus of research is Shinsaku no and applications of no beyond the borders of Japan. And so this is a beautiful example of applications of no through Zoom reaching a global audience. So we're delighted to have you this morning where you are and this evening where I am. So take the floor, John.
Great, thank you very much. Good morning, good evening, everyone. Ohayo gozaimasu, or good morning gozaimasu, however we'd like to say it. Yes, it is 6 a.m. here in the big Nikon, as we call Tokyo, so I will probably not be as loud as I normally am because host disabled participant screen sharing. Let's see here. Can we try to share get me to be shareable? Can you co-host me maybe? 1 second, I am waiting. Let's see. Oh, that looks better. Oh, there we are. Excelente. Okay. All right. And all right, here we go. So your screen sharing is paused. Play to it. I don't want to share it. I do want to share it. Did that work? Is it sharing? It's not sharing. Let's try again. Where are you? Oh, why aren't you working, my friend?
Is there anything we can do to help?
I'm trying to get it. Let's see if it doesn't. Why?
It's shared momentarily. We had it.
You had it for a second.
There it is.
You have it now.
You have it now.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay, Yahoo! Okay. So, welcome everyone again. Yeah, let's get into it here. So, no gaku. There's a bunch of slides. We're gonna get to some chanting at the end, but I kind of want to, ease into it in traditional Jo Hakyu form. But no gaku, let's look there, the characters at the bottom there, right? No and gaku, no literally, yeah, ability. And gaku is enjoyment. So we know is really like the enjoyment of ability, the enjoyment of skill, watching skill. Let's go through here. Today's objective, we're going to do an overview of no with a brief history. We're going to talk about Jo Hakyu as a structure. We're going to talk about the structure of a whole no, and we're going to get into exactly one little piece of a no called the kusei, and then we'll get into some questions and answers at the end there. All right. If there's ever any questions at any time, throw them in the chat, and hopefully Jennifer or Justin can throw an answer in there or save them till the end. All right. The beginnings of No. So No dates back. The real kind of creation we talk about is really in the late 14th century, but it's kind of an amalgam of Sangaku and Sarugaku, which come from China and went through Korea. And Sangaku, Sarugaku really is kind of, it was started as Sangaku and then it morphed into this word of Sarugaku, and Sarugaku means monkey music or monkey enjoyment. And that was acrobatic and it was storytelling, but it was, there was magic involved. There was really kind of entertainments, right? Dengaku was the arts of the agrarian society. And so you had lots of drums and work in the fields. Japan traditionally is a rice growing society. And so there were all kinds of rituals around the growing of rice, the planting of rice, the harvest of rice, and all of that. And then we have Bugaku, which is a musical form and dance form that was also from China and Korea. And so these forms kind of borrowed from each other. And here we have in the late 14th century, Kanami, who was a Sarugaku performer, and he incorporated something called kusei mai. There's a great novel called The House of Kanze, which kind of fictionalizes the life of Kanami and Zeami. And they talk about Kanami studying under a particular kusei mai performer. And a kusei mai performer was an iterant woman performer who would go from town to town dressed as a man and perform at temples. And so the kusei mai were these kind of popular dances that these shirabyoshi would dance. And Kanami incorporated that into Sarugaku. And so he's really kind of the founder of No, and this is happening in the late 14th century, in the late 1300s. But it's credited to his son, who was Zeami. Zeami wrote down all of his father's teachings. And so he, of course, credits his father with the creation of the form. But we now here in the future credit Zeami because he's the one who wrote it all down. And this is kind of emblematic of traditional Japanese art also, right? That it's handed down from, and we're always giving credit to the person before us, right? No curtain calls and No, we're not trying to get accolades. We're really trying to hand down, and the whole point in many ways of the form, again, is the enjoyment of skill and handing it down to the next generation. So Zeami, who started at a very young age, he is credited with writing at least 1/5 of the current repertoire, which is in the 250 No range. That number is very debatable because a number of them could have been written by his father, but he wrote them down. I mean, you just don't know. It was a long time ago, in the Muromachi period. So what is No? That's, this is a very sticky wicket, and defining it is very difficult because it's a complete art form where no one element can claim favor over another. I find it that it's a meditation on a theme. It has, as I mentioned, this kind of amalgam of a number of different forms in there. So you have chant, which has very Buddhist roots, which you can hear if you listen to the chant. There's the dance. Again, I mentioned Bugaku and Dengaku in these kusei mai. So this kind of amalgam of those. There's poetry, which, waka poetry was wildly popular at the time. And so anyone who was educated at all in the Heian period and into the Muromachi period is very well versed in waka poetry. In fact, there's many competitions of poetry. This something called Renga, which was kind of linked poetry. And this is very, very popular. And in some ways, it's kind of like rap battles of today. But these Renga competitions were the real pastime of people who would get together, and you would have these very, very strict rules about how you would compose a poem. And so it'd be one person would give a line and another person would give a line. And then I say here Chinese poetry as well, because anyone who was intelligent was also well versed in Chinese poetry. And so you would drop a line from a famous Chinese poem in there, and then the audience would be whoa, and there would be lots of mic drops, although no microphones back then. Anyway, so then we get into the other beautiful aspects of No, which are the other craftsmen. So you have costumes, and weaving technology comes into play, and mask work. And the masks come, in some ways, they're more mature versions of gigaku masks. And gigaku masks were whole head masks, but No masks are just covering the whole face. And we'll take a look at a couple of those in a minute. And then there's the music of No, which again stems from Dengaku and Bugaku, and perhaps even some of the the biwa players, who were Japanese lute players, blind poetry reciters, and lute players. All right. In the No world, there are a number of different players. And when I say players, there are a number of different character roles. And so one of these roles is called the shite, and that's the protagonist. And there are 5 different schools of shite. And when I say schools, not like building school, but more in the terms of a style of school. Yeah. So I don't know how many people are familiar with Jackie Chan and Drunken Master, right? So he has the drunken style, and then there's mantis style, and there's all these different styles of kung fu. Well, in No, we have these different styles of shite performance, which are the kanze, the hosho, the kongo, the komparu, and kita. So those are the protagonist schools. And then we have a waki, and a waki is kind of a secondary performer, not an antagonist, but kind of a deuteronomist, right? He without the waki, the shite doesn't appear. We'll get that in just a moment too. But then the waki, there are 3 schools. And in Kyogen, which are the comic performers, there are 2 schools. And then we have flute, where there are 4 schools. Kotsuzumi, there are 3 schools in flute. There are 4 schools in kotsuzumi, which is the shoulder drum, which I think a number of you have been practicing. Otsuzumi, which is the hip drum. There are 5 schools, and taiko, there are 2 schools. So the numbers in parentheses next to those schools are the current number of professionals within that school. And the current number of professionals written down here, I've added it all up here at the bottom, is 1,050. And I got this from the Nogaku Union site. So there's 1,050 different performers in the professional No union. There are probably 10 times that number as amateurs, which is very important, because it is the amateurs who are basically the audience for the No. You very rarely get a non-No aficionado to go see No. There's a lot of rules to know, but you can see here, right? We have these 5 shite schools, these 3 waki schools, these 2 kyogen schools, 3 flute, 4 kotsuzumi, 5 otsuzumi, and 2 taiko. And while there's only 250 pieces in the No repertoire, with the different combinations of all of these schools, any one piece has a possible combination of 3,600 ways of it being done, because every school does things slightly differently. So if you do all the different combinations, each piece has 3,600 different combinations. And so there are wild variations within No, right? So much like a jazz composition, depending on who the players are, things can be very different. Here's a picture of the No stage from above. A No stage is set. This area, the main stage, or the Honmutai, is approximately 6 meters by 6 meters. And that is set. So with this being set, that's very important, because the main performer, the shite, wears a mask, and it's very difficult to see through the mask. So if the stage is of varying sizes, you have the chance of falling off that stage, which you do not want to do, because the stage is risen 3 feet off the ground, and these stages were originally they're yanked from Shinto shrines, and they have maintained the same shape. The one thing that can be variable is this bridgeway, this hashigakari, which is the bridgeway from backstage, which is here, to the main stage, which is here. And this bridgeway is both a theoretical and a literal bridgeway. So this is the real world, and this is the imaginary world. And so all performers enter across this bridgeway. And so here's a picture of the bridge. This is the Kita stage in Meguro, which is just about to go under renovation. So, so on the back wall, you can see every no stage has a pine tree, which represents right. It's an evergreen, so always virile and venerable, and so they're quite honored. Pine trees are quite honored in Japan, and so last a very long time. And on the side here, we also always have painted, maybe a little bit difficult to see, but it's pine. It's some growing pine. So here we have pine is young and strong and grows quickly. And bamboo rather. My bad. Bamboo is on the side here and pine in the back. So bamboo over here, young, strong, grows quickly, and on the back, pine lasts a very long time and stays green. So you have this kind of yin and yang, right? Balance on the stage. And you'll notice here that there are audience on two sides. And so you have balance also in the audience, that the whole thing is a surrounded square. And that it becomes very important because it is circular in a way, right? I mean, yes, it's a square, but it's original stages were probably circular, but we won't get into that. But in any case, this is kind of an extension. Now, the square has become a circle, in words of Hollywood squares. But you have here the roof. Now, so you can see here that this is now indoors. No moved indoors from the Meiji period. So into the 1800s, in the mid 1800s, no stages moved indoors when they invented electricity. And so from before, all no stages were outside because everything was lit by the sun. And you can see here on the very faintly, maybe you can see that there's white stones here on the outside. And the white stones, they've even maintained the white stones that were used outdoors. And the white stones are there to reflect the light up onto the stage. You can see also on the side here, these 3 pine trees. Each pine tree will get larger as it comes towards the stage. So this helps create perspective and distance, because again, this bridgeway is both theoretical and literal. So when the main performer, when the shitei enters across the bridgeway, let's go back. When the shitei enters along the bridgeway, we're supposed to feel them going on a journey, and the pines getting larger can help create that perspective. On the back of the stage here is where the musicians sit, and the musicians are in full view all the time. And over here is where the chorus sits, and the chorus is in full view all the time. The musicians, 2 of them get to sit on stools, the others have to sit seiza. Seiza, the literal, the kanji for seiza is literally correct sitting. I can tell you from experience that while it may be correct, it is very painful. So you're sitting on your knees for a long time. And so the chorus comes out. They have a little door. Back over here. Right here it says Kiri to Guchi, right? This is the entrance for the chorus. And so back here is backstage. And so the chorus comes in here and they walk and sit here. This is the Jiutaiza where the chorus sits. And this is the backstage where the atoza, where the back of the stage, not the backstage, but the back of the stage, where the musicians, or the hayashi, sit. And this is Kagami Ita. And Kagami, the word in Japanese is mirror. So this is literally the mirror, and ita are boards, or in this case, wall. Yeah. So this wall, right? This matsu is in fact, the idea is that it's a mirror, and that it is reflecting what is out here in the audience, which would be the pine tree. So that the pine is that the performers are playing to the pine. Yeah, that they are that the pine is representative in many ways of the gods, and so the performers are playing to the pine. One of the interesting theories about why it's called that why we play to the pine. The word matsu in Japanese means pine, but it also means to wait. And so one idea was that gods and humans were living together in the world, and the gods went off at a certain point and told everyone to wait. And so as they're waiting, the people eventually decided to try to entice them back down to earth by performing for them in honor of them. Okay, so, and no is what? It's an entertainment, but I find it closer to sport than it is to theater. And why I say that is because audiences are there to witness the display of skill and not to lose themselves in a story or to be taken on any kind of journey. It is the audience's job to take themselves on the journey. It is their job to be informed of the form enough so that they can be moved by what happens on stage. No is still very much a ritual in a sense that it would rarely, if ever, now there might be very rare instances, for it to be done in full costume with all elements, all performers, shitei and waki and hayashi and kyogen, in full costume with mask without an audience. There are no full dress rehearsals, right? Example, like in sport, maybe you'll have a scrimmage, right, where you play with each other, but it's not done. It's usually not done in full uniform. It might be in pads, but it wouldn't be in full uniform. But in no, we have something that's called a moshiwase, and there, it's a mosu is to talk. Yeah, so this is a talk meeting. So you wouldn't have the full performance, you wouldn't have the full costume. No, it's only done one time. Yeah, so in different than perhaps regular theater or even a philharmonic or something, or an orchestra that would have a full rehearsal of a piece. A no is done one time and one time only, and there's no run of a no, right? In theater or in opera and most performing arts, in order to make money, you do a number of performances of the same piece so that you can get box office. But no, not, of course, I say not interested in box office. Of course, they're interested in box office. The more tickets you sell, the more money you make. However, we really are there. The no performers really make their money from the payment of their students. It's not so much the payment of their performance. And so in that way, they only do a performance one time. It's called kind of this idea of ichigo ichie, a one-time event. And so if they were to rehearse too many times, it wouldn't be a one-time event. This kind of plays into the idea of Zen. You probably talked a little bit about that in some ways. So sometimes the younger performers have what they call keiko no, and they'll do a full no performance just in costume and maybe mask, but not in front of an audience, but probably not with the full musicians there. Might have other shiteikata helping do the performances, but they might not pay to have the instrumentalists there because it's a little bit expensive. So here we have the picture, right, of a baseball diamond and a soccer pitch or a football pitch and the no stage. And I just want to point out like the similarities in that these things are set. You know, there are no variables in no. You know, baseball has many, many rules. And if you didn't know anything about baseball and you went to a game, you would probably be bored to tears. All of these people standing in different places. Yeah, the throwing of a ball, yeah, what's going on? Probably soccer is a little bit easier to understand. But again, offsides, handball, there's all kinds of rules, right? People who go and who are fans of a sport know the rules. And when you know the rules, well, then the sport becomes insanely or intensely interesting. Yeah. No is very much the same way. There are very strict rules to know. And if you don't know the rules, it can be like watching paint dry in many ways because there's very little movement in no. There are exciting no, but then there are challenging no. Right. I talked about the ritual of no, and then here's a picture of the curtain rising, the main performers coming through the curtain. This is, recently it's been a very big deal in basketball and football, not so much in baseball, but the announcing of each player as they come out. No kind of has that kind of excitement, but in a much more subtle way. There's no ballyhoo with spotlights getting people excited in that way. But you can see here there's a person on the floor kneeling. All people backstage will be kneeling when the main performers enter and leave the stage. There is tons of ritual still being performed backstage that the audience has no idea about. And none of that stuff is really written down. That's all just handed down. And the only way you really can learn how to do that is by making mistakes over and over again. And I have made those mistakes, but hopefully not over and over again. But in any case, when the shtei comes in, as I mentioned in football and whatnot, there's this huge excitement and then big announcement. But for the shtei, when the shtei comes in, or even when the waki comes in, these they're called the tachikata, the people who are the main performers who come in, who are standing on stage, who are costumed. They tell the people who are raising the curtain, the way to raise the curtain is to say the word omaku. And when the way you say omaku determines how they will open the curtain. So if they say omaku, the curtain slowly rises. But if they say omaku, then woof, it comes straight up. So the audience can hear it. No is not pretending to be, there's no fourth wall, right? They're not pretending that you're not there. Your presence as an audience person is important. You're part of the ritual. Without you being there, they wouldn't do it. In many ways, as I say, so we take no kind of like a sport, but if we're going to look at it, it is performed. And so there are rules, but then there is a story, but in many ways, it's a dramatized shamanic exorcism. And so many no are in 2 acts, and many no are called mugen, and mugen is phantasm no. So you have a 2-act piece where in the first act, the shtei, well, we'll get to that in a second, but the shtei inhabits the spirit of the mask to personify some unsettled spirit. And the shtei puts on that mask. That's the last thing that goes on in the shtei. The shtei, the main performer, the shtei does not dress themselves. They are dressed by their co-performers, and the chorus members dress them before the performance. And they sit backstage in what is called the Kagami no Ma, which is the mirror room. And they sit with the mask, so that they can kind of absorb the energy of the mask. And in some ways, the waki is a shaman who, more often by chance than by order, calls out the spirit. So sometimes a waki is literally a shaman in the piece, but often it's just a traveling priest or a traveler of some sort, and their energy then brings the shtei to appear, inspires the shtei to appear. Here's a picture of the shtei donning their mask. Masks are carved both inside and out, and signed in the back by the artist. And the shtei puts small pillows called ate on the inside of the mask to protect their face from this. Is lacquered on the inside, and lacquer, when it gets on your skin, can certainly cause lacquer poisoning. Or so you really want to make sure this lacquer is cured before you put it on. But the outside of the masks are painted, and there are about 150 masks in total in terms of variety, and they are also handed down from person to person. There are still some masks that are 500-600 years old, still in use. Here's more examples of masks. This is the Okina mask. This is the only hinged mask. All the other masks are set and solid, and so again, no real pretense of reality. Highly stylized, highly formalized, and the emotions of the mask. The job of the shtei is to remain as still as possible so that the audience can do their job of seeing the emotions in the mask, to reflect their own emotions in the mask. The job of the mask maker is to carve as simple a mask as possible, while at the same time carving into it every emotion that can be seen from different angles. And so the more still the shtei can be, the more angles that can be seen from the audience. If the mask moves around wildly, the audience won't be able to see different angles and reflections clearly, and the emotions will not be able to be drawn out from the audience. Now, that said, yeah, we go here. These are quite stoic and staid masks. And this particular mask, this is Shakumi, and you could look at this mask for a very long time, and you could find all kinds of beautiful emotions inside there. So looking at this mask, we could probably stare at it for 1 hour, maybe 50 minutes to 1 hour. But these masks, these are the demon masks, yeah? And these masks clearly have expression in them. And so nuanced expression in these masks is a little bit difficult. So these masks are really only seen for 15 or 20 minutes of a piece. And so in a 2-act piece, the first act might be 60, 70 minutes long. And the second act would be 15 or 20 minutes long, right? I would show this mask, and I would cover up the lower half and say, look at the upper half. So if you can do that with your hand, cover the mouth and just look at the eyes, if you're looking at your screen, and you can see the pained look of this demon mask. This is one of the more iconic no masks. This is the Hanya mask, and this is a pained devil, demon. And if you cover the upper part of the mask and look just at the mouth, there is ferocity, but there could also be some kind of enjoyment. And so all different kinds of emotions, even trapped into the one mask. Yeah. One of the other things that's quite exciting about masks is, as I mentioned about the bridgeway, right? And if you look at this mask too, if you do that same covering up, this Shakumi mask, on the top, it's quite, she has almost a placated, loving expression. Yeah. And if you cover up the eyes and look just at the mouth, while it's still quite neutral-ish, there is some trouble in there. And you can also tell that there's been trouble in her life by the hairs that are crossed here. So very subtle, yeah. So if the mask is moving all over the place, very difficult to be able to see these emotions. All right. So here we have again the masks. To make the mask expression, you have two things you can do. You can do terasu, which is to slightly raise the mask to brighten the expression. And when I say slightly, I mean like 1 or 2 centimeters, or kumarasu or kumoru, which is to cloud literally. And that's slightly lowering the mask, and that darkens the expression. And then the third way to really use the mask is to cut it. And you only would do this maybe 2 or 3 times in a whole piece, where you would move the mask quite quickly, and that expresses anguish or excitement. Here is a picture of the mirror room where the shite would put the mask on. The backstage, and all at this time, usually everyone around them is on their knees. I mean, unless they have to help. Once the shite puts the mask on, and that's also done with the help of people backstage, they are helped to behind the agemaku, that curtain that we saw earlier, and there they will they wait to go on stage. The instruments, as we mentioned, the fue, the kotsuzumi, otsuzumi, and taiko. And this is the position on stage that they would sit in the atoza in the back. Now, if they're playing just for a recital, everyone sits on the floor. But if they're playing in a full no piece, the 2 people in the middle, the daisho, sit on chairs. So the stories of No, as I mentioned earlier, there's approximately 250 in the current repertoire, are mostly taken from 3 different sources. The Heike Monogatari, which is the stories of the Japanese Civil War back in the 1100s, and the Genji Monogatari, which is the story of the lascivious Genji and his goings on, and the Issei Monogatari, this poetry tales. And we have these 250 pieces that in Zeami's time, when things were being written, the categories of No didn't quite exist. But as No got more and more involved in Japanese culture and became the official art form of the bakufu, or the Japanese, the samurai, it became more and more codified. And in the Edo period, we had a whole day's performance would go through these this whole cycle of Okina, the No that is not a No. And earlier there was that mask, that hinged mask. Okina is a performance, is the No that is not a No, which dates back way back before Dengaku, even into the early Heian period. It's really a ritualistic piece that would is only done a few times a year now, but used to start off each performance and was a very felicitous ritual. It's the only No where the mask is donned on stage. And now we can start to look at this idea of Jo Ha Kyu, where Jo Ha Kyu, we'll look at that in just a second, but it's kind of a beginning, a middle, and an end. A beginning, a breaking, and an end. How to describe it? Tricky, but we'll get to that in just 1 second. But in any case, the categories would be kami or waki no. Waki literally means side. And so there's the waki on stage, who's kind of the side character. When No was first translated, it was translated in English, the waki character, rather than being a secondary performer, was translated as the side man. And so the waki, that's why the first category is known as waki no, because waki no always accompanies okina, that No that is not a No. Oops. Following the waki no would be a shura no, or a warrior No, which is either the Jo's ha or the ha's Jo, right? The No in this case is possessive. So we have Jo Ha Kyu, and we have Jo no Ha, Jo no Kyu, or the Ha no Ha. So this might be a little bit tricky to understand, but so let's skip that. Sorry. We have the Kami No, the Shura No. Katsura literally means wig. And so the third category of No are these wig No. These are the most beautiful No. Shura No are quite exciting warrior No. Katsura No are very beautiful but long and very little happening No. Then things start to pick up, and we have the kyojo no, or the crazed no, the miscellaneous category, where this is usually often a woman who has lost a child, or has been jilted by a lover, or has bouts, or is jealous of something or other. And then if there's a no that doesn't fit into any category, it kind of gets chucked into this category. And then finally we have the kitty no, which are otherworldly creature no. Okay, so Jo, Ha, Q. I've kind of put these things in here for for those who understand the Jo, Ha, Q. Maybe you can understand Jo no Ha, Jo no Q. Many ways to think about how a full day's performance would progress. But in any case, there would be a Jo, Ha, Q to this whole day. Now, each of these pieces today, again, is about 90 minutes, anywhere between an hour and 90 minutes. Some pieces are longer, some pieces are shorter. And in between each of these pieces, there would be a Kyogen piece. And I mentioned earlier, Kyogen are the comic performers. Now, the comic performers would do a little kind of a skit, a palate cleanser. Now, that in between Okina and the Wakino, there would be nothing that would go directly in. But so you'd have Okina, the Wakino, a Kyogen, a Shurano, a Kyogen, a Katsura a Kyogen, a Kyojo no, a Kyogen, and then a Kiri no. So you have all of these things that would have a Johakyu to it. And then each piece would have a Johakyu to it. What is Johakyu again? So here's the characters, right? Beginning, oops, the ha didn't get done there nicely. Sorry. The ha, sorry, the kanji's, that's not kanji. Ha is really the character is breaking. So you have kind of a beginning, a breaking, and a quickening, and ending. And so one way I like to think of this is you're starting at the top of a mountain. You have a lake or a glacier, and the glacier melts, or the lake trickles into the mountainside, and the trickling streams are filtered through the rock, and those trickling streams turn into creeks, which then turn into rivers, which then flood down into the bays and harbors, where they're mixed in with where the fresh water meets the salt water, which then becomes the oceans. When those oceans are powered and moved by waves, which are moved by storms, which is evaporated by the sun, which turns into the rain to the top of the mountain, and we start all over again. So that's kind of the idea of Johakyu. And so each no, everything in no is imbued with Johakyu. The day's program has it. Each no has it. Each act has it. The Maiba or the Nochiba has Johakyu. Each scene, the Shodan, we'll get into that in just a second, has it. Each line has Johakyu. And I mentioned earlier, no is based in many ways on waka poetry, and waka poetry, as many of you may know, in Japanese poetry is based on a 7 and 5 syllabic structure. So all of that stuff has Johakyu. Now, the no structure, right? A typical narrative of a linear drama, right? Or an epic, a Greek epic, any kind of opera, is often many, many years, months, days, weeks, condensed into a 90-minute package. But I think of no more as a radial drama, right? It's an instant, it's a moment in someone's life that is then expanded into this 90-minute package. And so rather than a regular linear narrative that starts with some kind of complication between a protagonist and antagonist and has a rising action, I think of no more like a pebble being dropped in a pond, with the observation of the ripples being the resultant story. And so each audience member feels those ripples in a different way. Each audience member appreciates those ripples in a different way. And the performers on stage are also enjoying playing with each other to create those ripples. In many ways, a full nose, the structure is like a train, right? I mentioned earlier these shodan. And so shodan are like scenes. And, on a train, and this is a classic little choo-choo, You don't necessarily have to have the train in any order, although if you don't have the engine in front, it's difficult to move, but you could have the engine pushing from the back, but that would be not the most efficient way, right? So we have each shodan has very particular characteristics, right? Nanori, name announcement, the person enters. Michiyuki, a travel song, the person moves. Skizelfu, arrival lines. Action lines, closing lines. This is kind of a very basic structure. Here's a more full structure of a full, as I mentioned before, this Mugen no, this phantasm no. You have Act 1, this name announcement. The waki comes in, says who they are. Hello, I'm a priest and I'm from this place. Then the waki goes on a trip. I'm going to go to this other place. I've never been there before. The waki goes on this little trip, basically walking about 4 or 5 steps forward, and maybe 4 or 5 steps. But as they're doing those 4 or 5 steps, they're chanting about all the things that they see, and they're explaining the beautiful place that they are. And then they, after those 4 or 5 steps, and they chant this song, they say, "Aha, I have arrived." And then we have the shte, and the waki then goes and sits in the corner, and the shte enters, and the shte sings some song that introduces themselves. This is usually done on the bridgeway. Then they get to the main stage, and the shte meets the waki. And the waki says, "Do you know anything about this place?" And the shte says, "No, but I'll tell you what I do know." And then it turns out that the shte knows a lot about that place. And the shte does some kind of action. And in some cases, it's called a kusei. We'll talk to that in just a second. And then the waki says, "Boy, you sure do know a lot about this place." And the shte says, "That's because I am the spirit of something or other," right? Whatever that place is that he's been talking about. And he exits. Then a local person shows up. This is one of the comic actors. And when they do this bit here, that's not necessarily funny, but they're performing the role of a local person. And the local person then tells the tale of that place. And the waki says, "Well, my goodness, that's an interesting tale you just told me. I just met someone who kind of resembles that." And then the Kyogen often says, "Well, you should stick around and pray for that person's soul because they need some help." And so the Kyogen then leaves. And here we have the Act 2 that starts with the Machiutai, which is literally the waiting song. So the waiting song in many ways mirrors the Michiyuki, the travel song. Then we have another Issei, the shte enters, very much like the Issei in the first act. And then we have another conversation between the two, but this time the shte says, it's not anything very nebulous or poetic in many ways. It's very factual about what happened to them and why they're troubled. And then we have the shte action, which is often a dance, which is followed then by the kiri, which is the very end. So there's a jo hakyu to all of this. Yeah, there's jo, and then we can kind of get into the ha, and then kyu here, right? And then in each of these, so in the maiba, there's a jo hakyu, right? And in each scene, there's a jo hakyu. Yeah. So 3 shodan. We're gonna run out of time here, but I'm gonna get into the exciting part here if I can get through it. These 3 sections. So there's kurisashi kusei. So I put here kind of in this section, I just put kusei. But even within these shodan, there are many different ways. And again, these are the train cars, and they don't necessarily have to be in this order. Sometimes the kusei is in Act 2. You can put these train cars in any order you like in many ways, but you do need someone to enter. So, this not only kind of has to happen in the beginning, and there has to be an ending. So this caboose, the kiri kind of is the caboose, but where the first class car and the baggage car and all that stuff is, that's variable. Yeah. But there is this one section that happens in many, no, but certainly not all, called the kuri sashi kusei. And a kuri is often led into by this jo, this kind of upbeat, unmatched section where the drums are playing along at a fair clip, and the chanters are chanting in an upper register. If the no is melodic, it could be dynamic, but in any case, often it's just the chorus, but sometimes it could be shared with the shtei, going back and forth between the chorus and the shtei, and then it ends in a hon yudi, which literally is kind of my translation is a real vibration, where it just goes, well, it goes like this: yee 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 yee. Now, it doesn't have to necessarily be the syllable doesn't have to be e, but that that pattern of the vibration is always there. And when the audience hears that, like even going into that, when the audience, just like in I'm sorry, in baseball or something, when we see someone at the plate and they get down in a bunting position, they're going to bunt. And when you hear the hon yudi, you've been through a kudi, and you're probably going to head into a sashi. So there's all of these clues that tell the audience, even if you've never seen the piece before, what's happening next. And then after the kudi, we have this sashi. And the sashi is a style of recitative style chant. And it's unmatched, but that leads into the kusei. And the kusei was this thing that Kanami, as we mentioned way back in the beginning of this, kusei was this dance that Kanami incorporated into Sarugaku. And these were these popular songs and dances of the Muromachi period that certainly are not popular anymore in contemporary Japan, but is often the poetic center of the no. And it has a very particular style. It's a two-part chant song that is separated by what we call an age ha, which is where the shtei opens their fan. And a kusei is characterized by starting in low or medium pitches, again, if it's in this melodic wangin style, with at least one rise into the upper pitches or jo. And then we signify the middle by the age ha. And that's a high-pitched section sung by the shtei. And then part two of a kusei is characterized by picking up from the shtei's high pitch and even going higher into what we call joki. And then the kusei then comes back down and ends in the same place that it began. So again, we have a jo ha kyu, right? We start low, this beginning, and goes up into chu, this kind of ha, and then there's the jo. So we're going into there's a change there, but then the shtei starts here with this kind of ha no kyu, and into the second part where we have the kyu, and then back down and below. And you always want, again, this cyclical jo ha kyu where we start, where we begin. So through the use of no, jo ha kyu is able to convey waves of energy to entice the audience to be in a constant state of reemergence and to encourage mindful presence and to appreciate the economy of both movement and sound. And so, no takes its time to come into focus, and then it leaves right away. So that is that portion of the talk. Let me stop the share there. And I just want to, with just a couple of minutes, I want to give you an example. Do another share here. So to give you an example of you can see this, I believe. Yes? Okay. Here's an example of a kusei that I was talking about. And here is we start, this is the character for low, right? This is gay or low. And so we start in the low. Here's the character here. Can we all see that this is chu, right? This is the middle, right? This is the character for low. And so we have low, middle, low, middle, low, middle, low, middle, right? Going back and forth between low and middle, low and middle, low and middle. We get to the next page, right? And this is the character for high. It goes up into the high. And back down into the low, back down into the low, back down into the low, back to the middle, back to the low. Now we go back up here to the high, right? And now this is the middle line, the ageha. And now we're here, the chorus picks it up, chorus comes back in and back into the high. And this is that jo-uki part, extra high. And then we come back down into the low, and then we end here back in the low. So just wanted to kind of give you an example. This is from Hagoromo, which is one of the most popular of the story of an angel whose feathered robe that lets them fly lets her fly is found by a fisherman who wants to keep it, and she has to get it back, and he eventually gives it back so that she can return to heaven. But this is the kusei for Hagoromo. Here's the kusei for Atsumori. This is a warrior no. Low, medium, low, medium, low, medium, right? Again, low, medium. Very, very different story. Not an angel, a warrior, but again, the kusei, in some ways, the kusei is like a 12-bar blues, right? If any of us heard a 12-bar blues today, we'd know instantly that it was a 12-bar blues. Anyone who's interested in no, when they start to hear the kusei, even if it's a piece they've never heard before, they know it's kusei, yeah? So it's set in many ways. And so here's one, another very popular one, which is Funabenke, which is written somewhat later in the no world. But again, here's kusei and low, medium, low, medium. So this one's relatively short. So I will chant Funabenke kusei for you, and you can try to hear the going from low to the medium, and then we'll go into the high. And then that will be kind of, we'll wrap it up there, and we'll go into questions. All right? So let's take a listen to Funabenke kusei. Shikaru ni kousen no Futotabi o motori Aikei no haji wo susugishimo Tomoshiko wo nasu tokayo Rebayem no shinkanite Matsu ni gotomo bakase Komei tomitatoku Kokoro no gotoku naru beki yo Komo no ari no tongete mishirizoku wa ten ichi to kokoro yete shomosen ni samosa shite goko no ento wo tanoshimu kokoru ameshimo wariake no tsuki no miyako wo fudisutete saikai no hatomo ni Yoshio Nongeki Tomowo Yoni Tomowo Yini wo Nomiku Owo Yoni no Edawo Tsuroneru Omchini Nadu Komokuchishi Otsubeki. So that is an example of the kuse. And so I think you could tell or hear, maybe I hope, right, of going that there's expansion and contraction from the beginning to the end. From there was a first half. You heard at the end of the first half there. Maybe I should share that again and just kind of point that out. In the first half, we ended here. Oops, don't get too small on me. Thank you. Go back. So in the beginning, at the end of the first half, come back. We had a Tanoshimu. So here at the end, this long sesame seed. This is called Goma Fushi notation, right? Goma, sesame seed notation. This long sesame seed, then, right, kind of ended that first half. And then the shite came in here in the high range. And so we have all these expansions and contractions. There's one more slide. I lost it. Let me find it. 1 second. So there is one more slide. Here we go. Okay. And I will now, as Matsue Sensei was mentioning, some of you are doing, creating your own pieces. And, as we do English language, no, I wanted to give you an example. Ooh, it did it again. It paused. And I want to show you. Let's share this. Okay. No. Here. Okay. This is taken. Can we? It did stop. It paused. Resume share. Can you see that? I'm not sure you can.
We can see a slide, Shakespeare, no, adapted from
Great.
Hamlet.
All right. So no, there are very strenuous rules in no. But you can apply them to many different things, right? For those of you who know, this is Hamlet. This was the death of Ophelia in Hamlet. So take a listen to this, and this will be the last. There is a willow growing, or scant the brook. There is a willow growing, scant the brook, that shows its hoary leaves in the glassy stream. There with fantastic garlands did she make of flowers, nettles, daisies, and long purples. The liberal shepherds give a grosser name, but our cold maids do call them dead men's fingers. There on the pendant boughs, her crowned weeds clamoring to hang and envy or sliver broke when down her weedy trophies and herself fell in the weeping brook. Her clothes spread wide and mermaid like they bore her up each time she chanted snatches of old laws as one incapable of her own distress, or like a creature native and endued unto that element. But long it could not be, till that her garments, heavy with their drink, pulled the porridge from her melodious lay to muddy death. The porridge to her muddy death. So that is an example of how you can apply no and this idea of Johar Q to different texts. So I will end it there and open the floor to questions if there are any. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions?
I guess, oh, sorry, I didn't raise my hand. But I had a general one, if I could ask it.
Of course, anything.
How did you get interested in just knowing general? Like, did you just find it one day and you're like, oh, cool? Or
yeah, I was an actor, and I lived in New York, and I've been doing theater since I was a little kid. So when I would go see theater, I was like, oh, great, theater, yes. I mean, even if it was experimental, in New York in the 80s, there was lots of experimental theater, and oh yes. But I went to Japan Society in New York City, and someone took me to see a no, and I studied no in university and undergrad, of course, but it was just looking at the scripts, and at that time, maybe we watched the VHS tape, perhaps, but probably not even that. It might have been an audio recording, but I couldn't quite, it didn't. It just thought of it as like, oh, okay, it's just kind of a weird ritualistic theater, but then I didn't get it. But when I went to see it, then I really didn't get it, because all of a sudden I was like, wait, there's no way that what they're doing on stage is the same thing that they handed me the paper of, because nothing is happening. And yet it was so codified. I mean, they were so in the moment. They were so there. That they were like, well, it may, of course it must be, but it totally baffled me. I didn't get it at all. And so then I wanted to learn more about it, because it was a challenge. And so I took a workshop, I did another workshop, and next thing you know, I moved to Japan.
Thank you. Yuko Wright has a question.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Johnson. Thank you so much for your wonderful lecture.
Oh,
I have a couple of questions.
yeah, please.
So one question that I have is that you explained to us about those kind of three-tone systems, higher, middle, and lower. How are they, in a way, composed? So does that tone shift when you're talking about up on the tree, or when you're talking about the lyrics goes down to the ground, it goes down? How is that?
So the compositions are set, right? So I was looking at that notation I showed you, that's taken from a Taibon. Well, it was from a practice, a chant book, a practice chant book for beginners. But I mean, any chant book, I've got a billion around here. But this is like a good old regular chant book, but it's, oops, there, no. Yeah. So it's set, yeah. And so the pitches are set, but the thing is, it's not right. It's not the 5-bar line staff. So my low pitch this morning is probably lower than my low pitch this afternoon. So it's up to the head of the chorus or the stay to set the pitch. And once that pitch, so everyone knows, oh, they're doing a low, so that's the low. Then you know that it's going to be the middle pitch is set comparatively to the low pitch. So I did in Flunabenke, Shikadu Nikovo Semna. That's my low pitch. But I could have done Shikadu Nikovo Semna or Shikadu Nikovo Semna. All could be low. All of those are low. As long as when I go to the middle pitch, Shikadu Nikovo Semna Futatabi. That's set. And then when I go into the high, that's also set. That's relative to the chu, which is relative to the gay. So those intervals are set. And so, but compositionally, maybe, but in terms of like, if we're going to talk about something high, would they go up high? Maybe. It's more kind of more, I would say, emotional than literal. You know, the emotional quality of the text would generally gauge whether you go up or down in pitch. And again, I mentioned kind of briefly that there's wagin and gogin, right? Wa is melodic. Wa, the character for soft, or wa, the Japanese wa, peace, wa, and then Gogin, Tsuyoi, is the character for strong. In other schools, they call it Tsuyogin. In the Kita school, we call it Gogin. But that is a dynamic one. And so that one doesn't have a pitch. In that one, that's all about the expression through breath. So an example of Gogin would be like the Takasago is a good example. Takasago is a kamino, a god piece. And so, for example, that one, like, so if I sing, chant, I'm not thinking about pitch at all in there. That's all. I'm just thinking about how am I getting the breath? How am I expanding and contracting the breath? It's about breath control. And through that breath control and the use of the diaphragm, the pitch goes up and down. But if I think about it, I don't go like Takasagoya konobu rabune hobo agete. That would be if I'm thinking about pitch. But if I go Takasagoya konobu rabune hobo agete. It's more of an expansion, again, of breath and diaphragm to make the pitch go up and down than it is thinking pitch. And Gogin is really quite difficult. Gogin, yeah, I mean, easily takes, some people say 7 years. I think if you're a professional singer, you could get it earlier than that. But it takes a long time to do.
That's very impressive. Thank you so much for the demonstration. So one thing that made me think is that the way that Utai sings, is that the same as how Shite sings with the mask on, or is it?
That's right.
Is it the same?
Always the same.
Okay.
Same. So the Jiutai, the chorus, right? Those are all Shite performers. So all the Jiutai are Shite performers, and then today the person who's Shite is the Shite. But tomorrow, or maybe not even tomorrow, maybe later that day they'll be in the chorus, right?
Okay.
So,
all right.
and as I said, right, the majority of the money traditionally, that's changing now. In my humble estimation, it's a problem, but that's another discussion. The Shite traditionally gets their pay from their students. So the Shite will perform the main role 2 or 3 times a year, right? Only. The rest of the time, they're in the chorus, or they're the koken, they're doing the dressing, or they're, backstage, we're raising the curtain, all of those things, right? So they're only Shite a couple of times a year. And so when people ask someone, oh, what's your favorite no? They ask professional no performers all the time, what's your favorite no? And almost always their answer is the one I'm doing right now, because there's only 250 pieces in the whole repertoire and they only do 3 a year. So they'll probably never get through the whole repertoire. They only really get a chance to do a piece once. Now, a few pieces like Kagoromo or Atsumori or these really popular pieces, they'll probably do a few times. But, you know, other ones like Dojoji or, you know, Ataka, these very, very elaborate pieces, they'll probably only do one time in their life. And so again, that's the Ichigo Ichie experience. And so, but yeah, that chant doesn't change at all. Right. And when they put the mask on, they don't change. There's no pretending that, you know, if they're wearing a woman's mask, they don't change the pitch of their voice. There's, you know, it's the audience's job to say like, this is a woman.
Mm-hmm. So that makes me think sorry to keep asking you a question. So the melodies, of course, that you have, right, let's say used in the Funabenke, is it transferable into, suddenly it appears in the Hagoromo? It's like a sectional. Do you see that it's repeated? Just the words are different.
So a kusei is a kusei is a kusei, but there's a zillion variations within the kusei because the text is different, right? There's a couple of kusei where that are nearly identical except for the words, nearly. However, but there's always variation, because then again, as I said, right, there's the different schools. So if you're doing it within the full no, one school of drumming might do things a little bit differently than another school of drumming. And so it would change in that way. So on the day, the head of the chorus has to be in tune with the drummer to know how to hold different syllables. So when I say things are set, they're set in terms of pitch, but the rhythms are set for each different school. So it has to be adapted every time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you. I actually have a couple more questions, but I won't let other people ask you questions. So maybe at the very end, if there's time. Thank you so much. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Yeah.
Hi, John. We had one question in the chat that it really connects with what Yuko-san was just asking. I can read it out. I assume they sing with the masks on throughout the performance. Does it change the sound of a piece? And do the performers have to compensate for that in some way?
So, yes, they wear the mask for the whole performance. There are some pieces called hitamen, which translates as direct mask. And in that case, there is no mask. So if the shite is portraying a middle-aged man, then they won't wear a mask because most shite are middle-aged men. So they don't wear a mask. But there's not a lot of hitamen. But in any case, they don't change a darn thing, right? One of the things is, Zayami talks about you have to adapt your performance for the audience. And I think no performers still do this. However, they assume that the audience knows almost as much about no as of course, they don't know as much as the performers because the performers are living and breathing it every day. But as I mentioned earlier, right, audience members, it's not it's not your everyday common ordinary garden variety audience member. It's not like someone thought like, oh, should we go to the movie theater and see Mission Impossible 5, or should we go see Funabenke? That decision has never been made, right? You're either into no or you're not into no. So, so the performers assume the audience is versed, and so they don't even try to make the text intelligible, right? Most of the audience has this. Right, you own these. You buy the text, and so or you're studying. If you're in the audience, you're studying the music, or you study the costumes, or you study the masks, or you study something. And so you're there to kind of in much ways, again, as to go back to the sports analogy, right? people who are watching sports like they did it when they were a kid, or they're in an amateur league or something like that. And so they're watching the batter, they're watching the pitcher, they're watching, you know, they're 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 watching some aspect of the form. So yeah, so maybe the long answer short, they don't change anything. It's the same all the way. They do project, but it's always the same. And they'll project if it's an outdoor no, and so there still are times where they do outdoor no in the evening. It's called takigi no or torchlit no, and there might be, as it was in the old days, there might be 1,500 people or 2,000 or 3,000 people sitting outside under the full moon drinking sake. In those cases, maybe things are a little bit louder, but there's microphones and stuff, so they'll have that. But in essence, they change nothing. It's kind of that idea, and my teacher says it all the time. Rehearse like it's a performance, then every performance is just another rehearsal. And it's also what I say to students is that the hapyokai, or the recital that you have, it's not a performance. All it is just another milestone to show your teacher how effective they've been in transferring their knowledge to you. And we're just vessels. Just as I mentioned earlier, that it's the shtei's job to be a vessel for the mask. It's the student's job to be a vessel for their teacher. And yes, there are very culty overtones to know, right? People say like, oh, there's these unwritten rules, and there's lots of bowing and senpai kohai, all kinds of that stuff, and none of it's written down. And if you make a mistake, you're in the doghouse. But you learn how to move on from the doghouse. Another thing I mentioned, no curtain calls, right? That it's egoless in many ways. The idea that it's an egoless form, right? We're not there for accolades, right? Clapping happens now, I think, out of habit. The audience claps because they think they're supposed to clap at the end of a performance. But there are, and I've been to a number of performances that were so beautiful, and the subject matter so deep. I mean, it was dark but deep, where the audience, it's at the end when it was totally silent, no one wanted to shatter that. And so everyone just got up with their programs and left in silence. And it was, magical. Like you were given this gift of meditation and quiet that you could take with you. Often people, it's an uncomfortable feeling, right? If everything's quiet at the end and you think, oh, I better, but I don't think you necessarily have to, because they're not expecting it.
And that might connect with this next comment. And I'll read from the chat. The rotation of performers from shite to chorus to backstage sounds more egalitarian than what I know about kabuki, where performers specialize in certain roles. Is this right?
That is very correct. So you don't specialize in women's role. You specialize in shite. So for example, a shite is a shite is a shite is a shite, right? So you're either chorus or the shite. A waki is always a waki, never anything else. So like a waki would never be a shite, right? A kyogen performer is only a kyogen performer, never the shite, never the waki. The kotazumi only plays kotazumi, right? The shoulder drum, right? So, and again, back to the sports analogy, just like in sports, everyone could play every position. You have your position and you play your position. There are these things called ranno, which happen infrequently, where it's like a party where the people all switch it up, and you like a shite will be a waki and a waki will be a shite, and a kotazumi will play flute, and but that's like there's drinking involved with that. That's not really a public performance. But yes, it is egalitarian. So you don't specialize in anything except your specialty. And so yeah, as opposed to kabuki, where right there's onagata and there's people who are arigoto characters, that doesn't exist.
Well, thank you very much. I think we're at time now, because we're 6:30 my time. So I want to just thank John one more time. Yuko, I'm sure we can put you in touch with John and you can continue your conversation. I'm sure he would be delighted to do that. Just reach out to me and I'll do that for you if you don't already know each other. Everybody else, thank you so much for coming. I see some applause coming forward in the reaction. So a nice round of applause for John again. I'm always so amazed as we wrap up to probably the most amazing thing I learned recently about No that I did not know, and you said it in your talk, is that it's not rehearsed when people perform it, right? It's happening in the moment, and it's such a remarkable feeling. I've seen it by candlelight. I've seen it candlelight with cherry blossoms falling on the stage. I've seen it by the ocean, and then you think of those contexts. You think of that beautiful moment that it's happening, and the fact that you are having that moment at the same time that all of the people on stage are having that same moment that only exists in that moment.